I thought the heavy brass key in my palm would finally feel like safety. After 33 years of quiet discipline, this house was supposed to be the one thing that was truly mine. But while I was measuring windows for curtains, my parents were already measuring my equity to pay for my sister's dream wedding. I didn't know it yet, but the sale was already pending, and the people I trusted most were the ones holding the hammer. The smell of fresh interior paint usually suggests a beginning, but as I stood in the foyer of my new home, it smelled like victory. It was a sharp, chemical scent that overpowered the mustiness of the lake air drifting in from Maribel Ridge, and to me, it was perfume. I held the keys in my hand, the brass biting into my palm, and let myself breathe for what felt like the first time in 10 years. I was 33 years old. I was a senior logistics manager for a regional shipping firm, a job that required the kind of dull, relentless attention to detail that makes people boring at parties but indispensable in a crisis. I had saved for this house with a terrifying frugality. I drove a sedan that was older than my college degree. I brought brown bag lunches to work while my colleagues ordered sushi. I had turned declining social invitations into an art form, all to accumulate the 20% down payment that now sat in the bank account of the escrow company. The house was not a mansion. It was a 3-bedroom craftsman built in the late 80s, set back from the road by a line of mature oak trees that dropped leaves with aggressive consistency. But it had good bones, a fireplace with a real mantel, and a view of the water if you stood on your tiptoes in the master bedroom. It was mine. My name was on the deed. My signature was on the 30-year mortgage. I walked into the kitchen, my heels clicking on the linoleum I planned to replace next year. I ran my hand over the laminate countertop. This house was supposed to be the threshold. This was the moment I crossed over from being Ruby the reliable daughter, the one who fixed things, into Ruby the adult woman who commanded respect. I thought that if I could just show my parents, Glenn and Marissa, that I had built something tangible, they would finally see me as a peer rather than a resource. I was naive. I see that now. I mistook their dependence on me for love, and I mistook their controlling nature for concern. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my mother. "We are just around the corner," she wrote. "Dad wants to measure the entryway for that antique hutch." I stared at the screen. I had closed on the house 3 hours ago. I had not even unpacked a single box. I had specifically told them I wanted the first evening alone to soak it in, to drink a bottle of cheap champagne on the floor and eat pizza. But the Fosters did not do boundaries. The Fosters did swarm tactics. 10 minutes later, Glenn and Marissa Foster swept into my driveway in their leased luxury SUV. My father, Glenn, stepped out first. He was a handsome man, aging with the silver fox grace of someone who spent more money on skincare than he did on his retirement fund. He wore a crisp polo shirt and khakis, looking like he was about to captain a sailboat he did not own. Marissa followed, carrying a potted orchid that looked expensive and fragile. She hugged me, the scent of her floral perfume overwhelming the fresh paint. "It is actually decent," she said, pulling back to survey the house with a critical squint. "Smaller than the photos, Ruby, but it has potential. We can work with this." "Thank you." "Mom," I said, taking the plant, "I love it. I am really happy." Glenn bypassed the emotional greeting and went straight for the structure. He walked past me, tapping on the walls. "Load-bearing?" he asked, knocking a knuckle against the partition between the kitchen and living room. "I think so," I said. The inspector said, "You need to open this up," he interrupted, waving a hand. "Blow out this wall. Put in an island. It is too closed off. You want flow." "Ruby, flow is resale value. I just bought it." "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "I am not thinking about resale yet. I am thinking about where to put my couch." He ignored me, pulling a tape measure from his belt. He always carried tools he rarely used for actual labor. "Where's the breaker box?" he asked. "And the main water shutoff?" "You need to know these things." "I know where they are," I said. "Show me," he commanded. Not unkindly, but with the assumption of authority that had defined my entire life. I led him to the garage. He inspected the electrical panel, humming to himself. "You have a spare key hidden yet?" he asked. "Not yet. I literally just got here." "Well, give me the spare from the closing packet," he said, holding out his hand. "Your mother and I will need it for the contractors." I paused. "What contractors?" "The ones we're going to call," he said, snapping his fingers as if I were being slow. "To fix that kitchen. And the floors. You cannot live on this linoleum." "Ruby, it is depressing. I am not doing the floors yet." I said firmly, "I am on a budget. I need to replenish my savings before I start renovating." Glenn looked at me with a pitying smile. "The kind you give a child who thinks they can fly. Don't be cheap, Ruby. It is an investment. Besides, I need access in case of emergencies. What if a pipe bursts while you are at work?" "You are 45 minutes away from us now." I handed him the key. I handed it over because it was easier than fighting, because I wanted him to be proud of me, and because I had been trained since birth that saying no to Glenn Foster was an act of betrayal. Marissa appeared in the doorway, holding my closing folder. I had left it on the kitchen counter. "Ruby, why is your interest rate so high?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "Mom, please do not go through my financial papers," I said, stepping forward to take the folder back. "I am just looking out for you," she said, her eyes wide with hurt. "You get taken advantage of so easily. You are too trusting." The irony of that statement would not hit me until later. 2 days later, the family gathered for dinner at my parents' rental condo. They had sold their large house 5 years ago to downsize, a move they framed as a lifestyle choice, but which I suspected was necessary to cover debts I was never allowed to ask about. The atmosphere was electric, but not because of my house. My news had already been digested and discarded. The spotlight was firmly on Tessa. My sister Tessa was 27, 6 years my junior, and she moved through life with the confidence of someone who had never truly faced a consequence. She was beautiful, vibrant, and chronically chaotic. She sat at the head of the table, her hand extended to show off a diamond ring that caught the light of the chandelier. Calder proposed. She shrieked for the 5th time. Can you believe it? Calder Wynn was a man who spoke in buzzwords. He was launching a startup that had something to do with blockchain and luxury goods, a combination that sounded like a scam to me but sounded like the future to my parents. "We are so proud," Marissa said, dabbing at her eyes. "A wedding. Finally. We have to move fast," Tessa said, leaning forward. "Calder has investors coming in from Europe next month. We need to lock down the venue so we can set the date. We are thinking Larkhaven Conservatory." I choked on my water. Larkhaven? Tessa. That place starts at $50,000 just for the room rental. Tessa's face hardened instantly. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "It is my dream. Ruby, I have wanted Larkhaven since I was 12. It is very expensive," I said, looking at my parents for backup. Glenn was nodding, a faraway look in his eyes. "It is a statement," Glenn said. "The Wynn family comes from money. We need to show them that the Fosters operate at the same level. This isn't just a party. Ruby, it is a merger." "But who is paying for it?" I asked. The table went silent. The air grew heavy. Marissa reached out and patted my hand. "We all have to pitch in," she said softly. "For the family." I put my fork down. "Pitch in? I just bought a house. I have $600 in my checking account until payday." "Ruby, you are the stable one," Tessa said, her voice taking on a whine. "You have your career. You have assets now. I have debt." I corrected. "I have a mortgage." Glenn cleared his throat. He looked at me with a stern expression, the one that meant the discussion was over. "We will figure it out," he said. "But Ruby, do not rain on your sister's parade. Not tonight. She deserves this." I stayed silent for the rest of the meal. I felt the familiar weight settling on my shoulders, the burden of being the designated adult in a room full of children. I went home that night to my empty house, locked the door, and told myself I would set a boundary. I would not pay for Larkhaven. I would buy them a nice toaster and attend the shower, but I would not bankrupt myself for a party. The signal started the following Tuesday. I was at work, managing a crisis involving a shipment of frozen seafood stuck in a port in Tacoma. When my phone rang, it was Mrs. Gable, the neighbor to my left. She was a retired librarian who spent her days gardening and monitoring the street with benevolent vigilance. "Ruby, dear," she said, "I just wanted to tell you how nice that young man was." I frowned, holding the phone between my shoulder and ear as I typed. "Which young man? Mrs. Gable?" "The photographer," she said, "the one taking pictures of the house this morning. He was very polite when I asked him to move his car so I could get the mail." I stopped typing. "Mrs. Gable, I didn't hire a photographer." "Oh?" She sounded confused. "Well, he had a tripod and everything. He was taking photos of the front porch and the yard. I assumed it was for your insurance or something." "Maybe," I said, my stomach tightening. "Thanks for telling me." I hung up and checked my call log. I had a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. I listened to the voicemail. "This is Brad from Northgate Realty Group." The voice said, "Just calling to confirm we are all set for the lockbox install tomorrow. Give me a ring back." I stared at the phone. Northgate Realty? I wasn't selling. I had not even unpacked my winter coats. I assumed it was a mix-up, a wrong number entered into a database. I made a mental note to call them back on my lunch break, but the seafood crisis escalated, and I forgot. By the time I got home that evening, the sun was setting. I walked up my driveway and stopped. The flower beds, which had been overgrown with weeds when I moved in, were pristine. Fresh mulch had been laid down. The dead branches on the oak tree had been trimmed. It looked beautiful. It looked ready to show. I unlocked the door, my heart beating a little faster. Inside, the house was quiet. Nothing seemed missing. But on the kitchen counter, the stack of mail I had left that morning was perfectly squared at the corners. I told myself my mother must have stopped by. She had a key. She probably did the gardening as a surprise. A way to apologize for the pressure about the wedding. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Thursday morning shattered that belief. I was drinking coffee, scrolling through my personal email, when I saw the subject line. It was from an automated service used by real estate platforms. "Your listing is now live. 1402, Maplewood Drive." I laughed. A short, dry sound that echoed in the empty kitchen. I clicked the email, expecting to see an error message or a scam. Instead, I saw my living room. The photo was high resolution, bright, and airy, but it wasn't my furniture. My scuffed beige sofa was gone, replaced by a sleek, mid-century modern gray sectional. My dining table was gone, replaced by a glass-top table with 4 velvet chairs. I scrolled down, my hand shaking. There were photos of the kitchen, the bedrooms, the backyard. The house had been staged. Someone had come in, removed my things, brought in rental furniture, taken photos, and then put my things back? No, that was insane. I looked closer at the living room photo. The view out the window was correct. But the furniture, it was digital. Virtual staging. They had photoshopped furniture over my empty rooms. I looked at the text below the photos. Open house, Sunday, October 12th, 1:00 p.m. to 4:00 p.m. That was 4 days away. I dialed my parents. My mother answered on the second ring. "Hi, honey," she said. "Mom, why is my house listed for sale?" There was a pause, a long, heavy silence that told me everything I needed to know. "Oh, Ruby," she said, her voice shifting into a tone of frantic soothing. "Don't overreact. We were going to tell you tonight." "Tell me what?" I shouted. "That you put my house on the market?" "I just bought it." "It is just a test," she said quickly. "Dad and I were talking. The market in Maribel Ridge is so hot right now. We thought, why not just see? If we can flip it for a profit, we could cover the deposit for Larkhaven and still have enough for you to buy something else later." "Something else later?" I gripped the edge of the counter. "Mom, this is my home. You cannot just sell it to pay for a party." "It is not just a party," she snapped. "It is your sister's future. And we are not selling it, necessarily. We are just testing the water. If we get a high enough offer, it would be foolish not to take it. You can move back home with us temporarily. It would be fun. Like old times. I felt cold. The room seemed to tilt. They wanted me to sell my sanctuary, the only thing I had ever owned, and move back into their guest room so Tessa could have a greenhouse wedding. Take it down. I said, take it down right now. Ruby, be reasonable, she said. We already paid for the marketing package. I hung up. I couldn't listen to her anymore. I pulled up the listing again on my laptop. I needed to find the agent. I needed to scream at a stranger. I scrolled to the bottom of the page. Listing agent. Brad Hemmings. Northgate Realty Group. Seller. Foster Family Trust. I froze. Foster Family Trust? There was no trust. My deed was in my name, Ruby Foster, a single woman. There was no trust. I called the number for Brad Hemmings. Brad speaking. This is Ruby Foster. I said, I am the owner of 1402 Maplewood Drive. You have my house listed for sale. I did not authorize this. Take it down. Brad let out a small, condescending sigh. Ms. Foster, I understand you might be having some seller's remorse. It is very common, but we have a signed listing agreement. I didn't sign anything. I yelled. I have the document right here, he said, his voice bored. Signed by the trustee. What trustee? I am the owner. Ms. Foster. The title is held by the Foster Family Trust. Your father, Glenn Foster, is the trustee. I have the paperwork. He signed the authorization on Tuesday. That is impossible. I said, I closed 2 weeks ago. In my name. Look, he said, I don't want to get in the middle of a domestic dispute. I have a valid contract. If you have an issue, talk to your father. The open house is Sunday. Send me the document. I said, send me the listing agreement and whatever proof of ownership you think you have. Fine, he said. Check your email. He hung up. A minute later, a PDF appeared in my inbox. I opened it. It was a standard listing agreement. On the signature line, in a looped, jagged scrawl that looked vaguely like mine, but lacked the specific sharp tail I put on my Ys, was my name, Ruby Foster, and below it, Glenn Foster, trustee. But it was the document attached behind it that stopped my heart. It was a photocopy of a limited power of attorney. It stated that I, Ruby Foster, granted Glenn Foster the power to transfer real property into the Foster Family Trust for the purpose of asset management. It was dated 3 days after my closing. I looked at the notary stamp. It was smudged. The signature was mine. It was definitely my signature. But I had never signed this. I had never seen this document in my life. I sat at my kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing in on me. They had forged my signature, or... I thought back to the closing, the flurry of papers, the help my dad offered with the filing. Had they slipped something in? Had they traced it? My phone buzzed, a text from my friend Sarah. I told her everything in a rapid-fire series of texts. Ruby, call the police, she replied. This is fraud. This is a felony. I looked at the words. Call the police. I imagined the squad car in my parents' driveway. I imagined my mother crying in handcuffs. I imagined Tessa screaming that I had ruined her life. I imagined the shame of it, the public explosion of our family's dirty laundry. I can't. I typed back, I can't arrest my parents. Then you are going to lose your house, Sarah wrote. I put the phone down. The sun had gone down completely. The house was dark. I stood up to turn on the light, and I noticed something. My closing folder, the one Marissa had been looking at on the first day. I kept it on the top shelf of the hallway closet, buried under a stack of towels. I walked to the closet and opened it. The towels were different. The blue ones were on top. I always put the white ones on top. I pulled the towels down. The folder was there, but the clasp was undone. I opened it. The papers were shuffled. The deed, which had been in the front, was now in the back. Someone had been here today, while I was at work, while I was dealing with frozen seafood. Someone had unlocked my door, come into my house, and gone through my legal documents. My parents had a key. I had given it to them. I walked to the front door and threw the deadbolt. Then I dragged a dining chair under the doorknob. It was a useless gesture. They had a key. But it felt necessary. I sat in the dark living room. the light from the street lamp casting long shadows across the floor I was supposed to own. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a mark. And the open house was in 72 hours. I picked up my phone again. I didn't call the police. I didn't call my parents. I searched for a name I had heard whispered in my industry, a man who represented commercial developers when deals went bad, and families started stabbing each other in the back. Real estate attorney Maribel Ridge. I typed in the name, Elliot Crane. The website was stark. No smiling photos, just a phone number and a line of text. Title disputes, fraud litigation, asset recovery. I clicked the contact link. My name is Ruby Foster. I typed, my parents are selling my house without my permission. I think they forged a trust. I need help. I hit send. Then I sat in the dark and waited for the war to begin. The first sound I heard on Friday morning was the drill. It was a violent, whining noise that vibrated through the frame of my front door, sending sawdust drifting onto the porch where my father had stood just days before, measuring for improvements I did not want. I had called the locksmith at 6 o'clock in the morning. I paid him an emergency fee of $300 to be there by 7. He was a burly man with grease under his fingernails, who didn't ask why a woman with puffy eyes and shaking hands needed every exterior lock changed on a house she had owned for less than a month. He just worked, replacing the standard builder-grade deadbolts with heavy, high-security cylinders that cost more than my first car. While he worked, I stood on a stepladder in the corner of the porch, screwing a battery-operated camera into the siding. It felt like I was wounding the house. I was drilling holes into my own equity, scarring the fresh paint, but the fear that had settled in my gut overnight left me no choice. I put another camera over the garage and a third pointing at the back patio doors. I synced them to my phone. The screen flickered, showing a grainy, fisheye view of my driveway. It looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. By 9 o'clock, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a strip mall on the other side of Maribel Ridge, staring at the frosted glass door of Elliot Crane's office. I had expected a high-rise. I had expected mahogany desks and a receptionist who looked like a model. Instead, Elliot Crane operated out of a converted retail space next to a dry cleaner. The blinds were drawn. The sign on the door was just a piece of paper taped to the glass. I walked in. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt like a meat locker. Piles of files were stacked on the floor, on the chairs, and on the radiator. Behind a desk that looked like it had survived a hurricane sat a man who did not look like a lawyer. He looked like a tired detective from a noir movie. He was wearing a rumpled button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he was eating a bagel with a ferocity that suggested he hadn't eaten since yesterday. "You the one with the parents?" he asked, not looking up from a file he was reading. "I am Ruby Foster," I said, clutching my folder against my chest. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair cleared of debris. "Don't mind the mess. I am in the middle of a class action against a developer who built a condo complex on a sinkhole." I sat. I handed him the printout of the email from Brad Hemmings, the listing agent. Elliot wiped a crumb from his lip and took the paper. He put on a pair of reading glasses that were missing a nosepad. He stared at the document for a long time. The silence stretched out, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Finally, he laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a dry, sharp bark. "Amateurs," he muttered. "What?" I asked. "Look at this," he said, spinning the paper around to face me. He tapped a finger on the signature line. "This is your signature, or at least, it is a copy of your signature. But look at the resolution. The pixelation around the ink is different from the pixelation of the lines of the form. This was lifted, copied and pasted from a lower quality scan." I squinted. I could see the faint halo of gray pixels he was pointing to. "And here," he said, tapping the initials at the bottom of the page. "RF. Look at the R. The loop is closed. I never closed the loop on my R." I whispered. "Exactly," Elliot said. "Someone tried to freehand your initials, and they failed. But the real kicker is the trust name, the Foster Family Trust. What about it?" "In this county," he said, leaning back and crossing his arms, Trusts that hold real estate usually have to be recorded with a specific date of formation in the title. The Foster Family Trust dated October 10th, 2023. Something like that. This just says the Foster Family Trust. It is sloppy. It is a generic placeholder name. Does that mean it is invalid? I asked, a spark of hope lighting up my chest. It means it is contestable, he said, but to a real estate agent who is chasing a commission check, it looks close enough to valid to get the listing live. Agents aren't forensic document examiners. Ruby, they see a signature. They see a trust document. They see a $sign. He pulled his keyboard toward him. You need to see what they actually filed, he said. If they are listing it, they had to record something with the county to claim authority. You can't just sell a house you don't own without creating a paper trail. He typed rapidly for a minute, then clicked the mouse. He turned the monitor toward me. It was the county recorder's public access site. There, at the top of the list under my parcel number, was a new entry. Document type: Limited Power of Attorney. Grantor: Ruby Foster. Grantee: Glenn Foster. Recording date: September 28th. That was 2 weeks after I closed. Open it, I said, my voice trembling. He clicked the PDF icon. The document filled the screen. It was a single page. It granted Glenn Foster, my father, full authority to encumber, sell, lease, or transfer the property located at 1402 Maplewood Drive. It was notarized. I stared at the notary stamp. Jennifer L. Prenset. Commission expires May 2026. I don't know who that is. I said, I was at work on September 28th. I was in a meeting with regional directors all day. I can prove it. Elliot nodded. He printed the document. This is your smoking gun, he said. They recorded a fraudulent instrument against your title. This isn't just a family spat anymore. Ruby, this is slander of title. This is a felony. He handed me the warm paper. What do you want to do? He asked. I looked at the document. I looked at my name, sitting there next to my father's name, bound together by a lie. I want them to stop. I said, I want them to take the listing down. Then you have to confront them. Elliot said, you need to tell them you know about the recording. See what they say. Record the call if you can. But this state requires two-party consent, so be careful. Just get their reaction. Meanwhile, I am going to send a cease and desist to Northgate Realty and the title company. I am going to make sure they know that if they proceed with this open house, they are named co-conspirators in a fraud lawsuit. I walked out of his office with the document in my purse. The sun was high and bright, a beautiful autumn day in Maribel Ridge, but everything looked gray to me. I sat in my car and dialed my father's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice cheerful. Ruby, we were just talking about you. Tessa was wondering if you could pick up the wine for the engagement dinner on... Dad, I cut him off. I am looking at a document from the county recorder's office. Document number 249901. There was a silence on the line. The cheerfulness evaporated instantly. What are you doing digging around in county records? He asked, his voice dropping an octave. It is a limited power of attorney. Dad, it says I gave you control of my house. It was recorded 2 weeks ago. Ruby, listen, he said, his tone shifting to the patronizing smooth jazz voice he used when he was trying to sell a client on a bad idea. You are overreacting. That is just temporary paperwork. Temporary paperwork? I shouted. You forged my signature. We did not forge anything, he snapped. We filed it on your behalf. You get overwhelmed. Ruby, you always have. You take on too much. We knew you would panic about the mortgage payments eventually, so we just set up a safety net. The trust is a vehicle to help you manage the asset. We are trying to protect you. Protect me by selling my house? We are just testing the market, he yelled back. Why are you so obsessed with this house? It is just wood and drywall. Your sister has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. My mother's voice came onto the line. She must have been listening on speaker. Ruby, how could you? She sobbed. Tessa is in the other room crying. She is so stressed about the deposit. You are punishing the family because you are jealous. Jealous? I asked. Stunned. "You have always been jealous of Tessa," Marissa said, "because things come easily to her, because she is happy, and now you are trying to sabotage her wedding with this legal nonsense. It is cruel." "Ruby," I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp, twisting ache. They truly believed it. They had rewritten reality so thoroughly that in their version, I was the villain for owning my own home. "I am not jealous, Mom. I am the victim of fraud. And I have an attorney." I hung up before they could respond. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I was shaking so hard I couldn't put the key in the ignition. An hour later, my phone buzzed with an email from Elliot. Attached. Cease and desist. Letter sent to Northgate Realty Group. ITN. Broker of record. I read the letter. It was brutal. It used words like malicious, fraudulent conveyance, and immediate injunctive relief. It demanded the immediate removal of the listing, the cancellation of the open house, and a written retraction of all marketing materials. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Surely, this would stop them. No real estate brokerage would risk their license for a single listing. I was wrong. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Elliot called me. "They are refusing to pull it," he said. "What?" I asked. "How?" "I just got off the phone with their corporate counsel. They are claiming that they have a valid listing agreement signed by the trustee. They say your claim of fraud is a civil matter between you and your father, and until a judge tells them otherwise, they are contractually obligated to the seller on their agreement, which is the trust. But there is no trust," I said. "They don't care," Elliot said. "They are hiding behind the paper. And the agent, this Brad guy? He told his boss that he spoke to you and that you sounded unstable." "Unstable?" "He said you were emotional and having second thoughts about the sale." Elliot said gently, "They are framing this as seller's remorse from a neurotic daughter. They are betting that you won't file a lawsuit before Sunday. What do we do?" I asked. "We escalate," Elliot said. "But Ruby, you need to understand something. The law is slow. The open house is fast. If we can't get a judge to sign an emergency order by Sunday morning, people are going to walk through your front door." I looked at the new deadbolt on my door. "Let them try," I said. Saturday morning was gray and rainy. I woke up with a headache that felt like a nail driven between my eyes. I couldn't stay in the house. I felt like a prisoner in my own living room, waiting for the siege. I decided to investigate the notary, Jennifer L. Prensett. I typed the name into the state's licensing database. It gave me a business address on the outskirts of Maribel Ridge, in a strip mall near the highway. I drove there. The address belonged to a place called Pack and Ship Plus. It wasn't a law office. It wasn't a bank. It was a dusty storefront with fluorescent lights that buzzed and shelves full of cardboard boxes. I walked inside. A teenager with blue hair was behind the counter, looking at her phone. "Is Jennifer Prensett here?" I asked. The girl looked up, popping a bubble of gum. "Jen? She only comes in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She's the owner." I pulled up the photo of the power of attorney on my phone. "Does she notarize documents here?" "Yeah, $5 a stamp," the girl said. "But you gotta have ID?" "Jen is strict about that." I stared at the girl. Strict? My parents had walked in here with a forged document and no Ruby Foster, and Jennifer Prensett had stamped it. "Did a couple come in here around September 28th? Older? Good-looking? The man talks a lot?" The girl shrugged. "I don't know. That was weeks ago. We get a lot of people." I looked around the shop. It was the kind of place where rules were flexible if you smiled the right way or slipped an extra 20 across the counter. My father was a master at both. He probably charmed Jennifer Prensett, told her his daughter was sick in the hospital and needed this signed urgently. And she had bent the rules just this once. I left the shop feeling dirty. It was all so cheap. My financial ruin had been facilitated in a strip mall shipping store for $5. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, watching the camera feed on my iPad. It was raining harder now. The wind was whipping the oak trees, sending wet leaves plastering against the windows. At 11:30 at night, a car turned into my driveway. I stiffened. It was my parents' SUV. I watched on the screen as the doors opened. Tessa got out of the passenger side. She was wearing a raincoat over her pajamas. Glenn got out of the driver's side. They walked up to the front porch. I could hear their voices through the camera's microphone, tinny and distorted by the wind. "Hurry up, Dad," Tessa hissed. "It is freezing. Relax," Glenn said. "I just want to make sure the staging is okay. Brad said he wanted to add some flowers to the foyer before Sunday." He pulled a key from his pocket. It was the key I had given him on closing day, the key that no longer worked. He slid it into the lock. He turned it. Nothing happened. He jiggled it. He pulled it out and tried again, shoving it harder this time. "What is wrong with it?" Tessa asked, stomping her foot. "It is stuck," Glenn grunted. He stepped back and looked at the lock. He looked at the deadbolt. "She changed it," he said. "The little brat changed the locks." Tessa let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "She locked us out? But the open house is Sunday. How is Brad going to get in?" "She is declaring war," Glenn said, his voice cold. Then he looked up. He looked right at the corner of the porch ceiling. The infrared light on the camera glowed red in the darkness. "What is that?" Tessa asked, following his gaze. Glenn stared into the lens. For a second, our eyes met through the digital void. I saw the realization hit him. He wasn't just locked out. He was being watched. "Let's go," he said, grabbing Tessa's arm. "Now." They ran back to the car. The taillights flared red as they backed out of the driveway, tires spinning on the wet asphalt. My heart was hammering against my ribs. They had come to stage my house in the middle of the night. They had come to violate my space again. I didn't sleep. Sunday morning, the day before the open house, I realized I needed to understand the scope of the fire before I could put it out. I knew they needed money for the wedding, but the desperation I had seen in Tessa's face on the camera feed didn't match a simple desire for a fancy party. It looked like panic. I knew Tessa was meeting her wedding planner at a coffee shop downtown at 10 o'clock. I knew this because my mother shared the family calendar with everyone, a habit she had never broken. I drove to the coffee shop. I didn't go inside. I parked 3 cars down and cracked my window. Tessa was sitting at a patio table, despite the chill, talking on her phone. She was smoking a cigarette, a habit she hid from Calder. I couldn't hear her at first. Then she stood up and started pacing, her voice rising. I turned off my engine and listened. "I know it is due," she said, her voice cracking. "I know, but the funds are tied up in escrow. Just give me 48 hours. Please, if you cancel the catering hold, the venue pulls the date." She paused, listening to the person on the other end. "No. You can't tell Calder. You cannot call him. If he finds out the deposit bounced, everything collapses. Do you hear me? He will walk." She stopped pacing. She leaned against the brick wall of the coffee shop, sliding down until she was crouching. "I promise," she whispered. "The money is coming. We are liquidating an asset. Just wait until Tuesday." She hung up and buried her face in her knees. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a house of cards. She had bounced a check. She was hiding financial ruin from her fiancé, and she was using my house as the liquidity to keep the lie alive for 2 more days. I drove home and called Elliot. I told him about the key, the camera, and the phone call. "It is desperate," Elliot said. "That makes them dangerous. People who are afraid of being exposed do stupid things." "What are my options?" I asked. "The open house is tomorrow." "Option 1, Elliot said. "We file for an emergency temporary restraining order. We go to a judge tomorrow morning. Sunday court is rare, but for emergency property disputes, we might find a magistrate. It is a long shot. Option 2? We file a fraud affidavit with the multiple listing service directly." He said, "We bypass the brokerage. We flag the property as disputed. It might get the listing suspended, but it takes time for them to process it." "And option 3? We show up," Elliot said. "We let them host the open house, and we walk in the front door with a stack of documents and blow the whole thing up in front of the buyers." I closed my eyes. I wanted option 3. I wanted to burn it down. But I was still Ruby. I was still the sister who had helped Tessa with her homework. I was still the daughter who wanted peace. I want to try one more thing, I said. I called Tessa. She answered on the first ring, sounding breathless. Ruby? Did you change the locks? Dad is furious. Tessa, stop, I said. I know about the money. I know about the catering deposit. I heard you. Silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. I am willing to help. I said, I will give you $5,000. It is all the savings I have left. You can use it to pay the vendor. But you have to cancel the Larkhaven wedding. You have to tell Mom and Dad to pull the listing. You have to admit what you did. We can plan a smaller wedding. I will help you. We can fix this without committing a felony. Ruby, please, she whispered. 5,000 isn't enough, she said, her voice trembling. The venue alone is 50. The flowers are 20. Calder's investors. They expect a show. If I change the plan now, he will look like a failure. I will look like a fraud. You are a fraud. Tessa, I yelled, losing my patience. You are selling my house to pretend you are rich. It is my only chance, she screamed back. You have a house. You have a job. You have everything. I have nothing. Ruby, this is the only thing I have ever had that makes me feel special. Why can't you just let me have this? We will pay you back. Once the wedding is over, Calder's company will take off, and we will pay you back double. Just let the sale happen. You are delusional, I said. Don't ruin this for me, she hissed. If you ruin this, I will never forgive you. Mom and Dad will never forgive you. You will be alone in that house forever. She hung up. I stared at the phone. The compromise was dead. The good sister was dead. I called Elliot back. Prepare the paperwork, I said. For the injunction? He asked. No. I said, for the open house. I want you to be there at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Bring the cease and desist. Bring the fraud affidavit. Bring everything. You sure? Elliot asked. It is going to be a scene. Good, I said. They want a show? Let's give them a show. The waiting was a physical thing. It sat on my chest like a sack of wet cement, making every breath a conscious, labored effort. My appetite had vanished somewhere between the discovery of the limited power of attorney and the realization that my sister was funding her wedding with my credit score. I tried to eat a piece of toast on Saturday morning, but it turned to ash in my mouth. My stomach was a knot of acid and adrenaline, a biological alarm system screaming that the predator was already inside the cave. I sat at my kitchen table, which was now covered in stacks of paper rather than placemats. I had become a historian of my own betrayal. I had organized everything into binders. Binder A was the house, the deed, the mortgage, the forged listing agreement. Binder B was the communication log, screenshots of texts, transcripts of voicemails, and printed emails. I was exhausted, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep, but my mind possessed a terrifying clarity. It was as if a fog had lifted. For 33 years, I had viewed my family through a lens of soft focus, excusing their behavior as eccentricity or incompetence. Now, staring at the cold, hard facts in black and white, I saw the machinery of manipulation. They didn't just love me, they used me. And the terrifying part was that they had convinced themselves there was no difference between the two. My phone rang. It was Elliot Crane. I picked it up on the first ring. Tell me good news, I said. I have news, Elliot said, his voice gravelly. I don't know if I would call it good, but it is ammunition. I put him on speaker and leaned over my notepad. My paralegal, Marcus, dug into the trust filing. Elliot said, the Foster Family Trust isn't a real estate holding vehicle. It is a generic template downloaded from a legal forms website. It was created 26 days ago. That is 3 days before I closed on the house. I said, exactly, Elliot said. The timestamp on the creation file shows it was generated at 11 o'clock at night. The trustee is listed as Glenn Foster. The beneficiary is listed as the Foster Family Estate. It is a shell. Ruby, it has no assets. It has no tax ID number. It exists solely to create a title entity that your father controls. It is fake, I said. It is legally flimsy. Elliot corrected. But here's the kicker. We ran a credit check on the trust entity, just to see if they had tried to open accounts. They didn't. But we found a cross-reference to your social security number. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? There is an inquiry from a lending institution called Bridgepoint Capital. Elliot said, It is a hard pull on your credit report. Dated last week. It is for a short-term bridge loan. $50,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't apply for a loan. I know, Elliot said. But the loan was approved. The paperwork lists Ruby Foster as the primary borrower and Glenn Foster as the guarantor. The funds were dispersed on Tuesday. Where did the money go? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. We are tracing it, Elliot said. But given the timing, I would bet my law license it went to a wedding venue. I closed my eyes. They hadn't just listed the house. They had already leveraged it. They had taken out a high-interest loan in my name, likely using the house as collateral or simply using my credit score to secure the cash, counting on the sale of the house to pay it back before the first installment was due. This is grand larceny. I said. It is, Elliot said, and it proves premeditation. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision to test the market. They have been planning to liquidate you for a month. Liquidate me. The phrase hung in the air. Cold and industrial. To them. I wasn't a person. I was an asset class. So what do we do? I asked. The open house is tomorrow. If they get an offer, and they have this power of attorney, we stop the showing. Elliot said, I am filing for an emergency temporary restraining order this afternoon. I am arguing that irreparable harm will occur if the open house proceeds. Will a judge sign it on a Saturday? It is a toss-up, Elliot admitted, but we have to try. In the meantime, I need you to stay away from your parents. Don't tip them off that we found the loan. Let them think we are just disputing the listing. If they know we have the loan documents, they might try to destroy evidence or move the money. I hung up and stared at the wall. $50,000. That was the exact amount Tessa had mentioned for the venue. They had stolen my identity to pay for a room rental. I needed to scream, but I didn't have the energy. Instead, I channeled the rage into the only thing I had left, the process. I picked up the phone again and dialed the number for Northgate Realty Group. I didn't want the agent. Brad. I wanted his boss. I had looked him up online. Stephen McLaren, managing broker. He answered with the smooth, practiced baritone of a man who sold luxury lifestyles. Stephen McLaren speaking. Mr. McLaren. This is Ruby Foster. I said, I am the owner of the property on Maplewood Drive that your firm is illegally marketing. Ah, Ms. Foster, he said, I have heard about this situation. Brad briefed me. Then you know the listing is fraudulent. I said, you have a cease and desist from my attorney. You need to cancel the open house. Ms. Foster, let's take a breath, McLaren said. His tone was infuriatingly calm, the vocal equivalent of a pat on the head. We received a letter, yes, but we also have a signed listing agreement from the trustee. In my experience, these family disputes happen all the time. Miscommunication, high emotions. It is usually just a matter of everyone getting on the same page. I am not miscommunicating. Mr. McLaren, I am telling you that the power of attorney is a forgery. If you allow people into my home tomorrow, you are facilitating a crime. He sighed. Ms. Foster, are you under a lot of stress right now? Brad mentioned you seemed very agitated. Buying a first home is a big transition. Sometimes buyers get cold feet and project that anxiety onto their family. I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. I am not agitated. I said, my voice deadly quiet. I am being defrauded. And you are about to be named as a defendant in a lawsuit for slander of title. Do you want your brokerage associated with a fraud case on the front page of the Maribel Ridge Gazette? There was a pause, a crack in the armor. We are just following the instructions of the seller of record, he said, his voice stiffer. If you have a court order, send it. Until then, we have a contractual obligation to our client. He hung up. He didn't believe me, or rather, he didn't care. The commission on a house in Maribel Ridge was likely $20,000 for $20,000. Stephen McLaren was willing to ignore a hysterical woman. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The sign was still there in the yard. Coming soon, open Sunday. It looked like a tombstone. A movement caught my eye. Mrs. Gable, my neighbor, was walking her corgi down the sidewalk. She stopped at the end of my driveway, looking at the sign, then looked up at the house. She saw me in the window. She waved, a hesitant, fluttering motion. I opened the front door and walked out onto the porch. The air was crisp, smelling of damp leaves. Mrs. Gable. I called out. She walked up the driveway, clutching the dog's leash. She looked worried. "Ruby, dear," she said, "I hate to pry, but is everything all right? I saw your parents here last night. It looked tense. I changed the locks. I said, they were trying to get in." She nodded slowly, as if this confirmed a suspicion. "You know," she said, lowering her voice, "I didn't want to say anything before. I didn't want to cause trouble. But last week, when that young man was here taking pictures, the photographer? Yes, and the agent, the one with the shiny suit. Brad. Yes, Brad. Your father was with him." I nodded. I figured as much. "But Ruby," Mrs. Gable said, stepping closer, "your father didn't just let him in. I was gardening right there by the hedge. I heard them talking. The agent asked if you would be home soon, and your father said, 'Don't worry about her. She does what she is told. Just get the photos done fast.'" She looked at me with pity, and then, Mrs. Gable continued, "Your father gave the agent a key. He took it off his own ring and gave it to him. He said, 'Keep this for the lockbox. I have another one.'" I felt a fresh wave of nausea. It wasn't just that they had listed the house. It was the contempt. She does what she is told. That was how my father saw me, a well-trained dog. "Thank you for telling me. Cynthia," I said. She reached out and patted my arm. "You are a good girl. Ruby, you worked hard for this place. Don't let them bully you." I went back inside and added this to my notes. Witness: Cynthia Hale. Saw Glenn provide key to agent. Heard Glenn dismiss Ruby's ownership. I spent the afternoon preparing for war. I cleared the kitchen table. I set up my printer. I printed 3 copies of the deed, 3 copies of the forged power of attorney, 3 copies of the cease and desist letter, 3 copies of the bridge loan inquiry Elliot had sent me. I was building a packet. If the brokerage wouldn't listen to me on the phone, they would have to listen to the paper trail. At 6 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Tessa. I stared at the screen. I hadn't heard from her since our screaming match the day before. "Ruby, I am sorry." The text read, "I was freaking out. I know this is hard for you, but please, just think about the big picture. Mom and Dad are so stressed. If you just let the open house happen, we can talk about the money. I promise I will make it up to you. After the wedding, we can go on a trip, just us sisters. Cabo? Please, Ruby, don't be the reason everything falls apart." I read it twice. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. First the apology, then the guilt. Mom and Dad are stressed. Then the bribe, Cabo, and finally the threat. Don't be the reason everything falls apart. A week ago, this text would have worked. I would have felt guilty. I would have thought about how much I wanted a sister trip, how much I wanted to be close to her. Now, all I saw was the bait. She didn't want a sister. She wanted an accomplice. She wanted me to stay quiet while they robbed me so she could pretend to be a princess for 6 hours. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and saved it to Binder B. At 7 o'clock, Elliot called. Bad news. He said, "The weekend duty judge is out sick." The alternate denied the emergency request without a hearing. He set the hearing date for Tuesday morning. Tuesday, I repeated dully. 2 days after the open house. He didn't see immediate irreparable harm. Elliot said, his voice dripping with frustration. He ruled that since the house can't actually close on a Sunday, we have time to litigate before the title transfers. He doesn't understand that the open house itself is the violation, so we are on our own. I said, "We are," Elliot said, "but I am not leaving you hanging. I will be there tomorrow, 1 o'clock sharp. We are going to do this the hard way. What is the plan? We intercept. Elliot said, I am bringing a process server. We are going to serve the agent with the lawsuit draft right in the driveway. We are going to hand out notices to every person who walks through that door, stating that the title is under litigation. We are going to make that house radioactive to buyers. It sounded terrifying. It sounded necessary. I will be ready, I said. I hung up and sat in the darkening living room. The house was silent. I looked around at the walls I had painted, the floors I had scrubbed. I remembered the flashbacks that had been haunting me all day. I remembered my college graduation. My grandmother had sent me a check for $500. I had planned to use it to fix the brakes on my car. My mother had asked to borrow it for a week to cover groceries. I gave it to her. 2 weeks later, I asked for it back, and she laughed. Oh, Ruby, don't be so petty. We raised you. Isn't that worth $500? I remembered the time I was 25 and renting my first apartment. Glenn had asked me to put a utility bill in my name for one of his rental properties. Because his credit was temporarily dinged, I did it. 6 months later, a collection agency called me. He hadn't paid a single bill. My credit score tanked. When I confronted him, he said, it builds character to deal with adversity. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't clumsiness. It was a pattern of predation. They saw my stability not as a virtue, but as a resource to be mined, and they had been mining me for years. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water. My phone chimed with an email notification. I glanced at it, expecting another automated alert from the realty site, but it wasn't. It was a personal email. The sender name was blank. The subject line was empty. I opened it. There was a single line of text, typed in plain black font. Ask your parents about the storage unit on Bryn Street. I stared at the screen. Bryn Street was on the other side of town, in the industrial district. It was a row of self-storage facilities and auto body shops. I checked the sender address. It was a burner account, randomuser1984@gmail.com. I replied immediately. Who is this? I waited. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. No response. I went back to the email. Ask your parents about the storage unit. Why would they have a storage unit? They had downsized to the condo. They said they sold everything they didn't need. Unless they hadn't, unless they were hiding something that didn't fit in the condo and didn't fit in the narrative of the happy, wealthy foster family, I copied the email and sent it to Elliot. Just got this. I typed, does it mean anything to you? He replied 30 seconds later. It means someone else knows their secrets, and they want you to find them. I looked at the clock. It was 9 o'clock on Saturday night. The open house was 16 hours away. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to ask my parents about the storage unit. I was going to find it. I drove across town. The streetlights blurring in the rain. Bryn Street was desolate at night. Chain-link fences, barking dogs, shadows stretching long across the wet pavement. There were 3 storage facilities on the street. I pulled into the parking lot of the first one, Bryn Street Storage Commerce. It was a large, orange and white complex with a keypad gate. I parked the car and walked up to the pedestrian gate. It was locked. Through the mesh, I could see rows of orange metal doors. I didn't have a code. I didn't have a unit number, but I had a hunch. I walked to the keypad. I typed in my mother's birthday. Error. I typed in my father's birthday. Error. I typed in Tessa's birthday. Error. I paused. I thought about the passwords they used for everything. The Wi-Fi, the Netflix account, the alarm system at their old house. It was always the same. The date of their anniversary. I typed in 061288. The light on the keypad turned green. The gate buzzed and clicked open. My heart hammered in my throat. I pushed the gate open and stepped inside. I was in, but I had no idea where to go. There were hundreds of units. I walked down the first aisle, the rain soaking my hair. I felt foolish. What was I looking for? A sign? A feeling? Then I saw it. About halfway down the row, a unit had a padlock that looked brand new. It was shiny silver, contrasting with the rusted iron of the other locks. But it wasn't the lock that stopped me. It was the piece of blue painter's tape stuck to the metal door. Right above the handle, on the tape, written in thick black marker, was a name: Foster. I stood in the rain, staring at the name. It was my father's handwriting, the messy, hurried scrawl of a man who assumed he owned the world. I took a picture of the door. I took a picture of the lock. I didn't know what was inside. Stolen furniture? Hidden assets? More forged documents? I turned to leave, my mind racing. I needed Elliot to subpoena the access logs. I needed to know who was coming here and when. As I walked back to the gate, my phone buzzed again. It was the anonymous emailer. Unit 402. The code is the same as the gate. I froze. I looked back at the unit I had just found. The number on the door was 402. Whoever this was, they were watching me. Or they knew me so well they knew exactly what I would do. I looked around the dark facility. I saw nothing but rain and shadows. I typed back, "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "A friend. Don't let them sell the house. Ruby, the house is just the beginning." I ran to my car, locked the doors, and drove away. The open house was tomorrow, but the storage unit was the key to something much darker, and I was going to open it. The rain had stopped by Sunday morning, leaving the air over Maribel Ridge heavy and smelling of wet asphalt. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, threatening another downpour, but I barely noticed the weather. I was standing in the gravel lot of Bryn Street Storage, shivering in my coat, waiting for Elliot Crane to work a miracle. He had met me there at 7 o'clock in the morning, holding a cup of black coffee and a manila envelope. He looked more like a weary homicide detective than a real estate attorney, but when he walked into the front office of the storage facility, his posture straightened into a terrifying kind of authority. I waited by the car. 10 minutes later, Elliot waved me inside. The manager, a balding man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, was typing nervously on his computer. "I have confirmed the unit belongs to Marissa Foster," Henderson said, not making eye contact. "The account was opened on September 15th. I did the math in my head. That was 3 days after my offer on the house was accepted." "And the payments?" Elliot asked, his voice flat. "Auto pay," Henderson said. "Linked to a debit card ending in 4491. My stomach dropped. That was my mother's personal account, the one she used for groceries and hair appointments. The one she always claimed was empty whenever I asked why they hadn't saved for retirement. "We have authorization to inspect the contents based on the fraud affidavit I just showed you," Elliot said, sliding a paper across the counter. "Unless you want to be named as an accessory to the concealment of stolen assets." Henderson held up his hands. "I don't want any trouble. I will unlock it. But you have to be quick." We walked through the maze of corrugated metal doors, our footsteps echoing on the concrete. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt like an intruder in my own life, about to open a door that I could never close again. Henderson stopped at Unit 402. He cut the yellow plastic seal he had placed on it earlier, then punched a code into the keypad. The lock clicked. He rolled the metal door up with a screeching rattle. The smell hit me first. It was the scent of my childhood home, lavender sachets and old paper. I stepped inside. The unit was small, maybe 10 by 10, but it was packed with military precision. Against the left wall were stackable plastic bins. Against the right, a collection of furniture wrapped in plastic. I walked over to the furniture. I tore a hole in the plastic covering a chair. It was a velvet dining chair. The same velvet dining chair I had seen in the virtual staging photos of my house. "They didn't just Photoshop it," I whispered. "They bought it. They were ready to stage it physically," Elliot said, standing behind me. If the virtual tour didn't work, they were going to move this stuff in. I turned to the bins. They were labeled in my father's handwriting: kitchen decor, bath towels, master bedding. It was a complete staging kit. They had bought an entire inventory of neutral, upscale accessories to erase my personality from my own home. But it was the folding table in the back corner that stopped my breath. It was set up like a workspace. There was a desk lamp, a stack of printer paper, and a folder. I walked over to it. The folder was labeled, Foster Family Trust. Ruby Property. I opened it. The first page was a draft of the listing agreement, but it wasn't the final one. It was a practice run. The signature line was covered in ink. Ruby Foster, Ruby Foster, Ruby Foster. Dozens of attempts. Some were shaky. Some were too slanted. But as I scrolled down the page, they got better. They got sharper. The loop on the R disappeared. The tail on the Y became the sharp, aggressive slash I had developed in college. My mother's handwriting was on the margins. Too curvy here. Watch the spacing. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to grip the table to stay upright. They had sat here, in this cold metal box, and practiced becoming me. They had turned my identity into a craft project. Look at this, Elliot said. He was holding a ledger he had found in a box underneath the table. It wasn't a real estate ledger. It was a wedding planner's binder. I took it from him. It was heavy, bursting with invoices and receipts. Larkhaven Conservatory, $50,000 due. October 15th, catering, $20,000. Florals, $12,000. It was obscene, but it was the notes in the margins that confused me. Next to the catering invoice, Tessa had written, Calder says put this on the business account. Check with investor group. Next to the venue fee. Must be paid before the pitch meeting on the 20th. I flipped to the back of the binder. There was a printout of an email from Calder Wynn to Tessa. Babe, the investors from Zurich are confirmed for the wedding. This isn't just a ceremony. It is the launch of Wynn and Slate Concepts. We need to show them solvency. The event has to scream liquidity. If we look cheap, they walk. The Series A funding depends on this night. Do whatever you have to do to make it look like we are royalty. I stared at the words. Scream liquidity. The wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a trade show. Calder Wynn was broke, or close to it, and he was using his wedding as a desperate attempt to trick investors into giving him capital. And Tessa. Tessa was the stage manager. They aren't just selling my house for a party, I said, my voice shaking. They are selling it to fund a con. Elliot took the binder. We need copies of all of this, he said. This proves motive. It proves urgency. And it proves that your sister isn't just a passive beneficiary. She is a co-conspirator. I felt a crack in my chest, a fracture running through the foundation of my loyalty. Tessa knew. She knew the wedding was a lie, and she was willing to burn down my life to keep the illusion alive. We left the storage unit with 3 boxes of evidence. I sat in my car, staring at the rain on the windshield, and made a decision. I needed to look her in the eye. I texted Tessa, meet me at the house, now. Or I send the file I just found to Calder's investors. She didn't ask what file. She didn't ask which house. She knew. 20 minutes later, her car screeched into my driveway. She ran up to the porch, her face pale and wet with rain. I let her in. She looked around the living room, her eyes darting to the security cameras I had installed. What do you want? She asked, her voice thin and brittle. I tossed the copy of Calder's email onto the kitchen island. Wynn and Slate Concepts, I said. Tessa flinched, as if I had thrown a stone. She looked at the paper, then back at me. Her defiance crumbled instantly, replaced by a terrified exhaustion. You went through my things? She whispered. You went through my title, I countered. You are funding a startup, Tessa, not a marriage. She slumped against the counter, burying her face in her hands. He is going to leave me, she sobbed. It wasn't a dramatic cry. It was the quiet, hopeless sound of someone who has been running for a long time. He told me last month, she said into her hands. The seed money is gone. He spent it on development and other things. The investors are getting cold feet. He said if we don't land the Series A next week, the company folds. And if the company folds, he said he can't have a wife who is a liability. So you decided to make me the liability? I asked. I didn't have a choice. She looked up, her mascara running in dark streaks. He put it all on me. Ruby, he said, fix the budget, or I walk. I couldn't lose him. I love him. You love a man who threatens you? I asked gently. Tessa, that isn't love. That is a hostage situation. You don't understand, she said, wiping her eyes angrily. You have always been fine. You have your job. You have your credit score. You are the strong one. I am the pretty one. That is all I have ever been. If I don't have this lifestyle, who am I? You are my sister. I said, and you are about to be a felon. I took a step closer. I can help you. Tessa, not with money. I'm not giving you a cent. But I can help you get out. We can go to the police together. We can tell them Calder coerced you. We can tell Mom and Dad the truth. You can walk away from this wedding and this man before he destroys you. She looked at me, her eyes searching for a lifeline. For a second, I thought she would take it. I thought I saw the little girl I used to share a bunk bed with. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. It was a text from Calder. Her face closed off. The fear returned, hard and absolute. I can't, she whispered. He will destroy me. He knows. He knows about the bridge loan. He knows Mom and Dad forged the signature. He said if I try to leave, he will turn us all in. He will say he had nothing to do with it. He is bluffing. I said, I can't risk it, she said, backing away toward the door. I can't let him win. I just need the house to sell. Please, Ruby, just let it go. She turned and ran out the door. I watched her go, feeling a mix of pity and rage that made my throat tight. She was a victim, yes, but she was a victim who was willing to make me a casualty. My phone rang. It was Elliot. I am at your office, he said. I needed a secure printer. You need to get down here. We have a problem. My office building was quiet on Sundays. A glass and steel monolith in the business district. I swiped my badge and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Elliot was set up in the conference room, surrounded by piles of paper. What is it? I asked, dropping my purse on the table. He handed me a document. Northgate Realty just updated the MLS listing. He said, look at the remarks. I read the text highlighted in yellow. Multiple offers expected. Seller requests highest and best by Monday at 5 o'clock. Cash buyers preferred. They are accelerating. I said, they know we are coming. Elliot said, they want to get a contract signed before the court hearing on Tuesday. Once they have a signed contract with a third-party buyer, unwinding it becomes 10 times harder. They are trying to create a bona fide purchaser scenario. My phone buzzed again. It was my father. We are downstairs. The text read, we know you are at work. Come down. Or we come up and cause a scene in front of your security guard. I looked at Elliot. They are here. I said. He stood up. Do you want me to handle it? No, I said, surprising myself. I need to do this. I went down to the lobby. The security guard, a nice man named Earl, looked relieved to see me. My parents were standing by the turnstiles, looking like a power couple who had been kept waiting for a table at a restaurant. Glenn was wearing his navy blazer. Marissa was in a cashmere wrap. They looked impeccable. They looked like the victims. Ruby, Glenn said, his voice booming in the empty lobby. This has to stop. You are embarrassing the family. I walked up to the turnstile but didn't scan them in. I stood on the other side, the glass barrier between us. The open house is canceled. I said, it is not canceled. Glenn snapped. We have people flying in from Chicago. Do you have any idea how much money we have spent on marketing? I know exactly how much. I said, I saw the ledger in the storage unit. Glenn's face went slack. The color drained out of him so fast, he looked like he might faint. Marissa let out a small gasp and grabbed his arm. You broke into the unit? Glenn stammered. I didn't break in, I said calmly. I have a very good lawyer, and we found the practice sheets. Dad, we have your handwriting practicing my signature. Marissa started to cry. It was her go-to defense mechanism, a weaponized sorrow. Ruby, please, she wept. We did it for you. We wanted to help you manage your assets. We sacrificed everything for you girls. We sold our house. We gave you everything. And now, when we need just a little help, just one small thing, you treat us like criminals? I looked at her. I looked at the tears that I had spent my life trying to dry. You didn't sacrifice everything. I said, you spent everything. You lived a life you couldn't afford, and you used me and Tessa to subsidize it. You selfish, ungrateful child, Glenn hissed, leaning over the barrier. We put a roof over your head. We paid for your college. I paid for my college. I corrected him. I am still paying the loans. And you didn't put a roof over my head. You just tried to sell the one I bought for myself. It is family money, Glenn shouted, his voice echoing off the marble floors. It is all the same pot. What is yours is ours. That is how a family works. No. I said, that is how a parasite works. Glenn recoiled. He looked at me with pure hatred. If you ruin this sale, he said, his voice low and shaking, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? We will cut you off. You will have no family. You will be alone in that house. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had walked me down the aisle at my high school graduation, and I realized that the threat wasn't a threat. It was a liberation. I am already alone. Dad, I said, I have been alone since the moment you decided I was worth less than a wedding venue. I turned around and walked back to the elevators. Ruby, come back here, Glenn screamed. Earl, the security guard, stepped forward. I think you folks need to leave, he said, his hand resting on his belt. I didn't look back. I went back to the conference room. My hands were shaking, but my mind was ice cold. They are desperate. I told Elliot, they know about the storage unit. They are going to push the sale through tomorrow no matter what. Then we push back. Elliot said. He pointed to the stacks of paper on the table. This is the public-facing packet, he said. I have prepared 50 copies. It contains the fraud affidavit, the cease and desist, the proof of the forged notary stamp, and a copy of the bridge loan inquiry showing the identity theft. We are going to hand these out? I asked. To everyone, Elliot said. To the buyers, to the neighbors, to the agent. We are going to flood the zone with truth. He handed me a sheet of paper, and this, he said, is for you. It is a script. When the confrontation happens, and it will happen, I want you to stick to these lines. Don't engage emotionally. Don't argue about the past. Stick to the property rights. You are the owner. They are trespassers. End of story. I took the script. I read it over. My name is Ruby Foster. I am the sole owner of this property. I have not authorized this sale. It was simple. It was powerful. But there is one more thing, Elliot said. He pulled a document from the bottom of the pile. He looked hesitant. I almost didn't show you this, he said. I didn't want to distract you before tomorrow. But you need to know the full extent of the plan. He slid the paper toward me. It was a draft of a trust amendment, found in the digital files of the storage unit flash drive. It was dated for the day after the wedding. It converted the Foster Family Trust from a revocable trust to an irrevocable trust. It listed the assets, proceeds from the sale of 1402 Maplewood Drive, and it listed the grantor, Ruby Foster, but it was the next clause that made my blood run cold. The grantor hereby assigns all future earnings, real property acquisitions, and liquid assets in excess of $2,000 per month to the trust, to be managed by the trustee, Glenn Foster, for the benefit of the beneficiaries, Tessa Wynne and Calder Wynne. I stared at the words. They weren't just going to sell the house. They were going to trap me. They were going to trick me into signing a document, probably buried in a stack of tax forms or closing papers, that would have garnished my wages for the rest of my life. They were going to turn me into a permanent servant. I would work, and they would spend forever. It wasn't just greed. It was slavery disguised as estate planning. I looked up at Elliot. They were going to own me, I whispered. Elliot nodded grimly. That is why we don't just stop the sale. Ruby, he said, we have to bury them. I looked at the script in my hand. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a sharp, diamond-hard resolve. I picked up the packet of evidence. I will see you at 1 o'clock. I said. I drove home. I parked my car in the garage. I walked into my house. The silence was heavy. I walked to the living room window and looked out. The open house sign was still there, swinging slightly in the breeze. I went to the kitchen drawer. I took out a pair of scissors. I walked out the front door, down the driveway, and cut the balloons tied to the sign. I watched them float away into the gray sky. Then I went back inside, locked the new deadbolt, and waited for the sun to rise on the worst day of my parents' lives. Sunday arrived with a sky the color of wet slate, a low, oppressive gray that pressed down on the rooftops of Maribel Ridge. It was the kind of weather that usually kept people indoors with tea and books, but I knew that for the real estate vultures circling my property, it was just another day to hunt. I did not hide. I did not barricade the doors. I did the one thing my parents never expected me to do. I acted like I owned the place. I was sitting at my kitchen table at 12:30 in the afternoon. I was wearing my best blazer, a sharp navy blue cut that I usually reserved for quarterly reviews with the regional directors. My hair was pulled back into a severe, tight bun. My hands were folded on top of a stack of 50 crisp, white envelopes. Across from me sat Elliot Crane. He was wearing a suit that actually fit him today, though his tie was still slightly askew. Next to him was a man I had only met 20 minutes ago, a licensed process server named Silas, a large, silent man with a thick neck and a clipboard that looked like a weapon in his hands. We drank coffee in silence. The house was spotless, thanks to my parents' unauthorized cleaning crew, but the air felt charged, static and heavy, like the atmosphere before a tornado touches down. "They are going to be early," Elliot said, checking his watch. "Agents always arrive 30 minutes prior to prep the lights and scent the rooms." I nodded. I felt a strange, vibrating calm. The panic of the last week had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard slag of determination. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the defendant. I was the plaintiff. I was the rock they were about to crash their ship against. At 12:45, I heard the heavy clunk of a car door closing in the driveway, then footsteps on the porch, then the beep, beep whir of the electronic lockbox hanging on the front door handle. The key turned. The door swung open. Brad, the agent from Northgate Realty, stepped inside. He was carrying a tray of oversized cookies and a bundle of glossy brochures. He was humming a tune I didn't recognize. He stopped dead when he saw us. The tray of cookies tipped slightly, sliding against his hip. He stared at me, then at Elliot, then at Silas. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Excuse me?" he finally managed, his voice climbing an octave. What are you doing here?" "I live here." "Brad," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't shake. I was sitting at my own table, drinking from my own mug. He blinked rapidly. "Ms. Foster? But your father said you were staying at the condo. He said the house was vacant for the showing." "My father lied." I said. Brad's face flushed a deep, angry red. He set the cookies down on the counter with a little too much force. "Look, I don't know what is going on with you and your family, but I have an open house starting in 15 minutes. I have buyers flying in from out of state. You need to leave. Now." Elliot stood up. He didn't rush. He unfolded his frame slowly, like a bear waking up. "Mr. Hemmings, is it?" Elliot asked. Brad bristled. "Yes. Who are you?" "I am Elliot Crane, attorney for Ms. Ruby Foster, the legal and sole owner of this property." Elliot reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. "This is formal notice," Elliot said, extending the paper. "We are serving you with a cease and desist regarding the marketing of this property. We are also notifying you that the power of attorney you are operating under is currently being contested in court as a fraudulent instrument." Brad didn't take the paper. He backed up a step, his eyes darting between us. "I have a signed listing agreement." Brad stammered. "I have a fiduciary duty to the seller. The seller is a trust that does not legally own this home," Elliot said, dropping the paper onto the tray of cookies. "If you proceed with this open house, you are knowingly facilitating a fraud. You are exposing yourself and Northgate Realty to liability for slander of title." Brad laughed. A nervous, hacking sound. "You are bluffing. This is just a domestic dispute. I am calling your father." He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Go ahead." I said, "Ask him if he wants to explain the notary stamp to the police." Brad ignored me, whispering furiously into the phone. "Glenn? Yes. She is here. She has a lawyer. No, she won't leave. Glenn, people are going to be here in 10 minutes. He listened for a moment, then hung up. He looked at me with a sneer that transformed his bland, handsome face into something ugly. "Your father is on his way," he said. "And my broker is coming too. You are making a big mistake. Ruby, you are embarrassing yourself." The first buyer arrived at 1 o'clock exactly. It was a couple in their 50s, driving a Lexus. They walked up the driveway, looking at the landscaping. Brad rushed to the door, pasting a wide, terrified smile on his face. "Welcome, welcome," he chirped, trying to block their view of the kitchen where I was sitting. "Come right in. We have refreshments." I stood up. I picked up 2 of the white envelopes. I walked past Brad, ignoring his outstretched arm. "Hello," I said to the couple. They smiled at me. "Are you the seller?" the woman asked. "I am the owner," I said, "and I need to apologize for wasting your time. This home is not for sale." Brad lunged forward. "She is joking," he laughed, a high, frantic sound. "This is the owner's daughter. She is having a hard time letting go. Very emotional attachment. You know how it is." The woman looked confused. She looked at Brad, then at me. "I am not emotional," I said, keeping my voice level and professional. "I am the sole title holder. My parents listed this home without my consent using forged documents. This property is currently the subject of a fraud investigation." I handed the woman the envelope. "This contains the case number and a copy of the deed." I said, "I would hate for you to get involved in a legal battle." The woman took the envelope. She opened it. She saw the attorney letterhead. She saw the bold words, "Notice of Title Dispute." She looked at her husband. "Honey, let's go," she said. "But the kitchen?" Brad pleaded. "Just look at the kitchen." "We don't want to get in the middle of this," the husband said, backing away. They turned and walked out. Brad turned on me, his face purple. "You can't do that. That is tortious interference. You are interfering with commerce. I am protecting my property." I said. More cars were pulling up. A black sedan, a minivan, a flashy sports car. The nightmare had begun. For the next 20 minutes, it was a war of attrition. Brad stood by the door, trying to usher people in with manic energy. I stood in the center of the living room, a statue of resistance, handing out envelopes. Elliot stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, watching. Silas stood by the front door, silent and imposing. The atmosphere was excruciating. Buyers would walk in, smiling, expecting a tour. Brad would start his spiel about the chef's kitchen and the natural light. Then I would step forward. I would introduce myself. I would explain that the listing was fraudulent. I would hand them the evidence. Some people got angry. One man threw the envelope on the floor and stormed out, cursing about wasted gas. Others looked embarrassed, mumbling apologies and retreating. Brad was unraveling. He was sweating through his shirt. He kept checking his phone, his eyes wild. Then the cavalry arrived. A silver Mercedes screeched into the driveway, blocking 2 potential buyers. A man in a tailored suit jumped out. It was Stephen McLaren, the managing broker. He stormed into the house, bringing a gust of cold air with him. "What is going on here?" he bellowed. He marched up to me. He was a tall man, used to intimidating people. "You need to leave this property immediately," he said, pointing a finger in my face. "You are trespassing. You are disrupting a lawful business transaction." I didn't blink. I didn't step back. "Mr. McLaren," Elliot said from the fireplace. McLaren spun around. "I suggest you lower your voice," Elliot said. Walking over, "You received my cease and desist yesterday. You chose to ignore it. Now you are on my client's property, harassing her. I have a contract," McLaren shouted, waving a hand at the room. "You have a forgery," Elliot said. "And now you have witnesses." He gestured to the room. There were 3 groups of buyers still lingering, watching the drama with wide eyes. "If you continue to insist on selling a home you know is disputed," Elliot said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I will file a complaint with the state licensing board by 5 o'clock today. I will have your license suspended pending investigation. Do you want to lose your brokerage over one listing? McLaren hesitated. He looked at the buyers. He looked at Brad, who was shaking in the corner. Then he looked out the window. Oh, thank God, he muttered. My parents had arrived. Glenn and Marissa walked in through the front door. They were putting on a performance that deserved an Oscar. They weren't angry. They were concerned. They were the loving parents dealing with a mental health crisis. Ruby! Marissa cried, rushing toward me with her arms open. Oh, sweetheart, what are you doing? She tried to hug me. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Mom, I said. Marissa froze, her face crumbling into a mask of tragic hurt. She is off her meds, Glenn said loudly, addressing the room. He looked at the buyers, offering a conspiratorial, apologetic smile. I am so sorry. Everyone, my daughter has been under a lot of strain. She gets confused. He walked toward me, his hand extended like he was approaching a frightened dog. Ruby, let's go to the car, he said, his voice dripping with fake soothing syrup. We can talk about this at home. You are making a scene. I am not confused. Dad, I said, and I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. Glenn's smile faltered. He leaned in close, so only I could hear. You ungrateful bitch, he hissed. Get out of here before I drag you out. You are ruining everything. I looked at him. I saw the vein pulsing in his temple. I saw the panic behind his eyes. I raised my voice. I wanted everyone to hear. Did you forge my signature on the power of attorney, Dad? Or did you pay someone at the shipping store to do it? The room went silent. Glenn stood up straight, his face pale. How dare you, he said. We found the practice sheets in the storage unit. I said, we found the trust drafts. We found the bridge loan paperwork where you used my social security number. Marissa let out a wail. Stop it. Stop it right now. You are hurting the family. Tessa ran in through the open door. She was wearing a white dress, carrying a clipboard, looking like she had just come from a bridal brunch. Did we get an offer? She asked breathlessly, ignoring the tension in the room. Brad, did the cash buyer show up? She stopped. She saw me. She saw Elliot. She saw the buyers clutching the fraud notices. Tessa, I said, it is over. No, she whispered. No, it can't be. The deposit is due tomorrow. She turned to Glenn. Do something. Fix it. Glenn looked around the room. He was losing control of the narrative. The buyers were whispering. Brad was cowering. McLaren was looking at his phone, probably calling his lawyer. Then, the final nail in the coffin. A man in a tweed jacket, one of the buyers who had been standing quietly near the foyer, stepped forward. He looked at Glenn. Glenn? The man asked. Glenn Foster? Glenn turned, his eyes darting. Yes? I know you, the man said. You are on the board of the Children's Hospital Foundation. I am Robert Vance. We met at the gala last year. Glenn's face transformed. He tried to summon the charm, the easy social grace that was his currency. Bob, good to see you. Yes, yes, what a surprise. The man didn't smile. He looked at the envelope in his hand. He looked at me. Is this true? The man asked, holding up the fraud notice. Are you trying to sell your daughter's house out from under her? No, Glenn laughed. A terrible, hollow sound. It is a misunderstanding. Legal technicalities. It says here you forged a trust. The man said, that is fraud. Glenn, that is moral turpitude. Glenn stammered. I can explain. The man shook his head. He looked at Glenn with pure disgust. I think the board is going to need to hear about this, the man said. We can't have this kind of liability associated with the charity. He turned to his wife. Come on, Susan, we are leaving. The man walked out. Glenn stood there, watching his reputation walk out the door. The social standing he had carefully cultivated, the facade of the wealthy philanthropist, was cracking in real time. He turned to me, his eyes black with rage. You did this, he snarled. Before he could move, sirens wailed outside. Blue lights flashed through the front window. Who called the police? Marissa shrieked. I did, McLaren said, stepping forward, to have her removed for trespassing. 2 officers walked in. They looked tired. They looked at the crowd of people in the living room. "Who is the homeowner?" the first officer asked. "I am," I said, raising my hand. "I am," Glenn said, raising his hand. The officer sighed. "Okay, let's see some ID and some paperwork." Elliot stepped in. He handed the officer the deed. He handed him the fraud affidavit. He handed him the court filing for the hearing on Tuesday. "Officer," Elliot said, "my client is the recorded owner. Mr. Foster is attempting to sell the property using a power of attorney that is currently under litigation for forgery. We are asking that you disperse this gathering as it is an unauthorized commercial event on private property." The officer looked at the deed. He looked at Glenn. "Sir, is your name on the deed?" "My name is on the trust," Glenn shouted. "The trust owns the house. Do you have the original trust document?" The officer asked. It is with the lawyer." Glenn lied. The officer handed the deed back to me. "Ma'am, the deed is in your name. Until a judge says otherwise, it is your house." He turned to McLaren. "You need to wrap this up. Folks, if the homeowner wants you gone, you have to go." "But we have buyers," McLaren argued. "You are trespassing," the officer said firmly. "Everyone out. Now." The room began to clear. The buyers scurried out like roaches when the lights turn on. Brad grabbed his tray of cookies and ran. McLaren glared at me, then stormed out, muttering about lawsuits. My parents stood there. They looked small. They looked old. "You happy now?" Tessa screamed at me. She was crying, her mascara running down her face. "You ruined my wedding. You ruined my life. I saved you from a felon." I said, "I hate you," she screamed. "I wish you were never born." "Tessa," Marissa sobbed, trying to grab her. Tessa spun around and ran out the door. Glenn looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes. There was only calculation, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to survive. "This isn't over," he said. He grabbed Marissa and dragged her out. I watched them go. The house was quiet again. The floor was covered in muddy footprints. The scent of the staged lilies was suffocating. I walked to the front door to lock it. A car was blocking the end of the driveway. It wasn't my parents' SUV. It was a black luxury rental. A man got out. It was Calder Wynn. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He looked calm. He looked bored. He walked up the driveway, his hands in his pockets. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Ruby, right?" he said. I stood in the doorway. Silas, the process server, stepped up behind me, crossing his arms. "Get off my property." "Calder," I said. He laughed softly. He looked at the house. "Shame," he said. "It is a nice little asset. Would have liquidated nicely." "You are a con artist," I said. "And you are a nuisance," he replied. He checked his fingernails. "You know, reputations are fragile things. Your father's, yours. It would be a shame if people started hearing stories about you, about how unstable you are, about how you stole money from your sister. I have proof." I said, "I have your emails. I have the ledger." He smiled, a cold, reptilian smile. "Paperwork gets lost. Ruby, files get corrupted. People get confused. You won the battle today. Congratulations. But you have made enemies you can't afford." He looked at Silas. "Big friend," he noted. "Hope he sleeps here." He turned and walked back to his car. He didn't look hurried. He looked like a man who simply had to move to Plan B. I watched him drive away. That night, Elliot and I sat in the living room. We had ordered pizza. The house felt empty, stripped of the illusion of family. "We did it," Elliot said, taking a bite of pepperoni. "The listing is dead. McLaren is going to pull it to save his license. The open house was a disaster. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. My father is going to lose his charity seat." I said, "Probably," Elliot said. "And your sister is going to lose her deposit. And your mother is going to lose her storage unit full of staging furniture." He looked at me. "You saved yourself." "Ruby, don't apologize for surviving." "I know," I said. "But you need to be ready," Elliot warned. Calder wasn't bluffing. Men like that, when they get cornered, They don't give up. They get nasty. He is going to try to hurt you. He is going to try to hurt your career. He is going to use your parents as weapons. Let him try. I said. I looked at the packet of evidence on the table. I have the truth. I said. Elliot raised his soda can. To the truth, he said. I clinked my can against his. To the truth. But as I looked out the window at the dark street, I knew the truth was a dangerous thing. I had burned my family to the ground to save my house, and now I had to live in the ashes. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a bureaucratic scent that I found strangely comforting. It was the smell of rules. After weeks of living in the chaotic lawlessness of my family's making, the Maribel Ridge County Courthouse felt like a sanctuary. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Elliot Crane. My hands were folded in my lap. I was wearing the same navy blazer I had worn to the open house, a piece of clothing that was quickly becoming my armor. Across the aisle, my parents sat with a lawyer I didn't recognize, a young, flustered-looking man who kept shuffling his papers and whispering to Glenn. My father looked diminished under the fluorescent lights, without the backdrop of a country club or a charity gala. His tan looked orange, and his confidence looked like twitchy arrogance. Ms. Foster, the judge said. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Please state for the record why you are seeking this injunction. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I had spent all my tears in the dark of my living room. Your Honor, I said, I am the sole owner of the property at 1402 Maplewood Drive. On September 28th, a limited power of attorney was recorded against my deed without my knowledge or consent. This document was used to list my home for sale to fund a wedding I am not paying for. I am asking the court to freeze all activity related to my property and to invalidate the fraudulent recording. The judge looked at the defense table. Counsel, she said, do you have the original wet ink power of attorney? The young lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my clients assert that the document was signed electronically by the plaintiff during a period of family estate planning. We are currently locating the metadata. Metadata, the judge repeated, her voice dry. I looked at Glenn. He was staring at the table, his jaw working. He knew that metadata was a lie. He knew there was no electronic session, just a cut-and-paste job in a storage unit. I am granting the temporary restraining order, the judge said, banging her gavel. No sale, transfer, or encumbrance of the property is permitted until the full evidentiary hearing next month. And counsel, I suggest you find that metadata very quickly, or I will be referring this matter to the district attorney's office for a criminal fraud inquiry. We walked out of the courtroom into the bright, harsh sunlight of the parking lot. My parents didn't look at me. They hurried to their car, heads down, fleeing the scene of their humiliation. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Elliot. Step 1, he said. The bleeding has stopped. Now we deal with the infection. That afternoon, I was sweeping the front porch, scrubbing away the muddy footprints from the open house, when Mrs. Gable, my neighbor, walked over. She wasn't walking her dog this time. She was clutching her cardigan around her chest, looking nervous. Ruby, she called out. I stopped sweeping. Hi, Cynthia. I heard about the court order. She said, the whole neighborhood is talking about it. I wanted to tell you. She took a deep breath. It was me, she said. The email. I froze. You sent the email about the storage unit? She nodded, looking down at her sensible walking shoes. The mail carrier, she explained. He is new. He mixed up the mail last week. I got a billing statement for a unit at Bryn Street Storage. It was addressed to your mother, but it was in my box. I was going to walk it over to their condo, but then I saw the invoice attached to the back. It was for staging furniture. Maplewood project. She looked up at me, her eyes wet. I knew they were up to something. Ruby, but your father, everyone on the street respects him. I didn't want to cause a fuss if I was wrong. I was afraid he would turn the homeowners association against me, so I created that email account. I am sorry I wasn't brave enough to just tell you. I walked down the steps and hugged her. It was a stiff, awkward hug, but it was real. You were brave enough. Cynthia, I said, you gave me the map. 2 days later, Elliot called me into his office. He had a bottle of champagne on his desk, but he wasn't opening it. Northgate Realty wants to settle, he said. He slid a document across the desk. They are offering to remove the listing permanently, issue a formal correction to the multiple listing service stating the previous listing was invalid, and pay you $10,000 in damages for the distress and the invasion of privacy. I looked at the number. $10,000. It would cover my legal fees. It would buy a lot of takeout. What is the catch? I asked. Elliot pointed to paragraph 4. The undersigned agrees to a strict non-disclosure agreement regarding the terms of this settlement and the events leading up to the dispute. The undersigned agrees not to disparage Northgate Realty Group or its agents publicly. They want to buy my silence, I said. They want to bury the mistake, Elliot corrected. They don't want the licensing board to know they marketed a property based on a forgery. If you sign this, the war with the brokerage ends. You get your money, you get your house, and everyone moves on. I thought about Brad, the agent, smugly eating cookies in my kitchen. I thought about Stephen McLaren shouting that I was interfering with commerce. If I sign this, I said, they do it to someone else next week. They learn that they can be sloppy and greedy, and if they get caught, they just write a check, pretty much. Elliot said. I picked up the pen. I drew a large X through the page. No deal. I said. Elliot smiled. I was hoping you would say that. We are going for full discovery? He asked. I want it on the record. I said, I want a judgment. I want the world to know that my house is not their inventory. The fallout began on Friday. I was at work when I got a notification that a vendor had canceled a payment request, then another, then a third. I called the number on the invoices I had photographed in the storage unit. This is Ruby Foster. I told the catering manager, I am calling about the Wynn wedding. Oh, Ms. Foster, the manager said, sounding stressed. We have already released the date. The check for the second deposit bounced this morning. Insufficient funds. And when we tried to run the credit card on file, it was declined. The house of cards had collapsed. I drove home that evening to find a car parked in front of my house. It was Tessa's convertible. She was sitting in the driver's seat, the engine off, staring at my front door. I walked up to the car and tapped on the glass. She rolled down the window. She looked like a ghost. Her skin was gray, her eyes hollowed out by sleeplessness. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked like the little sister I used to protect from thunderstorms. It is gone, she whispered. The venue, the flowers, the band, they all canceled today. I know, I said gently. Calder left. She said. Her voice broke. He packed a bag this morning. He said I failed him. He said I embarrassed him in front of the investors. He is going back to the city to stay with business associates. She looked at me. And the dam broke. He made me do it. Ruby, I didn't want to sell your house. I told him we couldn't, but he got so angry. He threw things. He said if I didn't find the money, he would tell everyone that I was the one who ruined his company. He made me feel like I owed him my life. I opened the car door. Get out. Tessa. Come inside. She sat at my kitchen table, shivering, while I made tea. I didn't lecture her. I didn't say, I told you so. The wreckage of her life was speaking loud enough. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It wasn't a check. This is the number for a therapist named Dr. Aris. I said, she specializes in financial trauma and coercive control, and below that is the address for an apartment complex in West Maribel. It is clean, safe, and cheap. I know the landlord. Tessa looked at the paper. You aren't going to help me with the debts? She asked, her voice small. The vendors? They are going to sue me. I can't fix the debts. Tessa, I said, you signed those contracts. You have to face that. But I can help you find a place to sleep where no one is screaming at you. I can help you rebuild. But I will not bail you out. She touched the paper. She didn't pick it up, but she didn't push it away. I don't know if I can do it alone. She whispered, You are not alone, I said. You have a sister. But you don't have a banker. She drank the tea. She didn't say thank you, but for the first time in months, she didn't look at me with calculation. She looked at me with exhaustion, and that was a start. The final summons came on Sunday. My mother called. Her voice was unrecognizable, frail, trembling, stripped of all its usual manipulative gloss. "Ruby," she said, "please, come to dinner. Just us. No lawyers, no scenes. We need to apologize. We need to heal as a family." I held the phone, looking at the recording of the open house chaos on my laptop. "Where?" I asked. "The Oaks," she said. "Your father's favorite table. 7 o'clock. Please, Ruby, for the sake of everything we used to be." I called Elliot. "It is a trap," he said immediately. "I know," I said. "They are going to try to get you to sign a retroactive authorization." Elliot predicted, "They are facing criminal charges for the notary fraud. If they can get you to sign a paper saying you verbally authorized the sale and the paperwork was just a formality, the criminal case goes away. They are desperate." "I am going." I said, "Then you need to be wired." Elliot said, "This state is a one-party consent state." I said, "I checked the statutes. As long as I am part of the conversation, I can record it." "Correct," Elliot said. "But be careful. Ruby, a cornered animal bites. If you catch them admitting to the forgery on tape, we win everything. But if they realize what you are doing, I will be careful." I said. I arrived at the Oaks at 7 o'clock. It was a place of dark wood paneling and white tablecloths, the kind of restaurant where the waiters whispered and the silverware was heavy. My parents were sitting in a booth in the back. Glenn was drinking a scotch, his knuckles white around the glass. Marissa was shredding a paper napkin into tiny piles of snow. I sat down across from them. I placed my purse on the table, the microphone of my phone pointing outward through the mesh fabric. "Hello?" I said. "Ruby," Marissa said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back. She flinched. "Thank you for coming," Glenn said. His voice was rough, like he had been shouting for days. He took a sip of scotch. "We have been doing a lot of thinking," Glenn said, "about everything. We realize we overstepped. We were under a lot of pressure with the wedding, and we made some bad calls." "Bad calls?" I asked. "You committed felonies." "Dad," Glenn grimaced, "let's not use legal words. Ruby, we are family. We made mistakes, but we did it because we thought you would want to help your sister. You have always been so generous." I stared at him. The rewriting of history was breathtaking. I am not generous. Dad, I am compliant. There is a difference, and I am done being compliant. Marissa started to cry. Softly. "We are in trouble." "Ruby," she whispered, "the lawyer says the district attorney is looking at the notary filing. They are talking about jail time." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "We just need you to help us fix the paperwork," she said. "If you could just sign a statement saying you knew about the trust, saying that we had a verbal agreement, it would all go away. We could be a family again." I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted an alibi. I can't do that. "Mom," I said, "that would be perjury. I didn't know about the trust." "But you could say you did," Glenn snapped, his temper flaring. "Who would know? It is just a piece of paper." "Ruby, do you want to send your parents to prison? Is that what you want? To see me in handcuffs?" I leaned forward. "I want the truth. Dad, how did you do it?" "What?" Glenn asked. "The notary?" I said, "Jennifer Prenset. How did you get her to stamp a document when I wasn't there? Did you pay her?" Glenn looked away. "I am not discussing that." Marissa looked at Glenn, then at me. She looked terrified. It wasn't Jennifer. Marissa whispered. Glenn slammed his hand on the table. "Marissa, shut up!" I kept my eyes on my mother. "What do you mean?" "Mom?" I asked softly. "We didn't go to the store," Marissa confessed, the words spilling out in a rush. "Glenn said it was too risky. He has a friend from the golf club. He knew an online service. You upload a signature, and they digitally stamp it. We took your signature from your student loan cosign documents from 10 years ago. We scanned it. Glenn stared at her, his face turning a violent shade of red. "You stupid woman," he hissed. I felt a chill run down my spine. They hadn't just forged it recently. They had kept my signature on file for a decade, waiting for a moment to use it, so it was premeditated. I said, "You stole my identity years ago." "It wasn't stealing," Glenn shouted, causing the couple at the next table to look over. "We are your parents. We own you. We made you. Everything you have is because of us. That house, that job, it is all ours by right. You are nothing without us." The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at my father. I finally saw him. He wasn't a patriarch. He was a man who believed that his children were property. I picked up my purse. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" Glenn spat. "For admitting it." I said, "I stood up. I filed an amended complaint this afternoon." "Dad," Glenn froze. "What?" I added a specific count for identity theft. I said, and I named John Doe as the notary. "But now I know it was an online fraud. My lawyer will be subpoenaing the digital records from your computer." Glenn stood up, knocking his glass over. The scotch pooled on the white tablecloth like dark blood. "You wouldn't," he said. "I already did." I said, "And one more thing." I looked at him with a pity that hurt more than the anger. "I got a call from the Children's Hospital Board today." I said, "They saw the police report from the open house. They are launching an internal ethics review of all your fundraising activities. They want to know if you managed their funds the way you managed mine." Glenn's face went gray. The charity board was his world. It was his shield, and I had just told him it was gone. "You killed me," he whispered. "You killed your own father." "No, Dad," I said. "You committed suicide. I just signed the death certificate." I walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. I heard Glenn shouting my name, but it sounded distant, like a ghost in a bad dream. Elliot was waiting for me in his car in the parking lot. The engine was running. I got in. I handed him the phone. "I got it." I said, "The digital forgery, the student loan scan, everything." Elliot took the phone. He looked at me, assessing the damage. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know." I said, "I feel light, like I lost 100 pounds of dead weight." Elliot nodded. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a folder. "I wasn't going to give you this tonight," he said, "but after what you just did, you need to know the rest." "What is it?" I asked. "We traced the bridge loan," Elliot said. "The $50,000 they borrowed in your name. It went to the venue, right?" I asked. "Part of it," Elliot said. "But here's the thing. To get a loan that fast, with that much risk, they had to cross-collateralize it." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means they linked the loan to their other debts," Elliot said. "Your father put up his condo as secondary security, but the terms of the bridge loan state that if the primary collateral, your house, isn't sold by November 1st, the loan goes into default, and if it defaults—" He paused. "If it defaults, the lender calls the note on everything attached to it, including Glenn's condo." I stared at him. "You mean, if I don't sell my house, they lose theirs?" Elliot said. He looked at me. "That is why they were so desperate. Ruby, it wasn't just the wedding. They were leveraged to the hilt. They bet your house to save their own, and because you stopped the sale, the bank is going to take their condo." I sat in the dark car, letting the information sink in. They were going to make me homeless to keep a roof over their heads. "So what happens now?" I asked. Elliot shrugged. "We have two choices. Choice A. We proceed with the fraud case. We use the recording. We send them to jail. And the bank takes their condo. Total destruction. And choice B? We settle," Elliot said. "We accept their surrender. We force them to pay off the bridge loan somehow, maybe by selling the condo voluntarily. And we seal the record. They lose their home, but they stay out of prison." He handed me the file. "It is up to you. Ruby, you hold the sword." I looked at the folder. I looked at the restaurant where my parents were sitting in the ruins of their ego. I thought about the years of manipulation, the borrowed graduation money, the guilt trips, the way they looked at me like I was a resource, not a person, but I also thought about Tessa, sitting in my kitchen, drinking tea and looking for a way out. I looked at my phone. My thumb hovered over Elliot's number in the contact list. I could burn it all down. I could finish it, or I could just walk away and let the consequences of their own actions do the work for me. I looked at Elliot. Drive, I said. Where to? He asked. Home, I said. My home. I closed my eyes as we pulled out of the parking lot. The story wasn't over. The lawsuits would drag on. The wounds would take years to heal. But for the first time in 33 years, the pen was in my hand, and I was finally ready to write my own life. Thank you so much for listening to Parents Listed My House for Sister's Dream Wedding. This story was a journey into the dark side of family dynamics, and I hope Ruby's fight for her independence resonated with you. I would love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Ruby should send her parents to prison, or is losing their home enough punishment? I can't wait to read your thoughts.